All right, hi guys, it's me, Jamie, and again we have another special guest. I know past few days we've been on a roll with all these interviews and all this new content that I'm uploading. I told you guys that I wasn't full of it when I said that we were revamping the channel and keeping things going. So, and today I have a very special guest with me. He is an acclaimed, PUA or pickup. Sorry,
I call it
PUA.
like the USA's #1 Asian dating service.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So yes, he's definitely yes. His name is JT Tran. A lot of you probably have heard of him. He is very famous for assisting Asian men with the issues with like dating and romance and advice and all sorts of things of that nature. And so I'm very very glad and very honored to have him on our channel today. So Mr. Tran, um, so I guess yeah, we'll just jump right into it. Well, actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll jump right into it. But I would love for you to introduce yourself to everyone here, and yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your channel. I'm a huge proponent of opening up dating options for Asian men with all women, Black, white, Latina. Actually, my or ABC's of Attraction YouTube channel, our most popular video is the Asian men and Black women one. So I definitely want all my guys to be out there and to meeting, quality women of all races, especially Black women.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely why I hit you up today because for many years I've actually been aware of your channel. I've done a lot of research into it and I admire greatly what you're doing. I just want to say from personal experience before we get into it. So, me myself, obviously, I am, Asian American male. And so I'm from here, born and raised from LA. And so, I want to be honest here, and I've actually talked about this a few times on my channel, but I have actually, just until up a few years ago, I've experienced a lot of issues with dating myself. And also I want to say that it's just like sort of what hit me was sort of this tidal wave of information, and it just sort of made me more aware, I guess, of my surroundings and in terms of like how Asian men are highly discriminated against when it comes to whole dating market.
Mhm.
I really didn't honestly know how difficult it was until I don't know, maybe like years ago, like almost 10 years ago, 2011. But sort of from a time, basically from that point on until about late 2016, for about 5 or so years, I really was kind of putting myself out there a lot, hoping to basically just like hit anything, you know what I mean? Just shooting my shot and hoping that it landed anywhere. You know what I mean? And so it really nothing was really working ultimately. And then I realized it was like, a lot of it was because I guess for me personally is because I am on the shorter side. I am an Asian male, and there are a lot of negative portrayals and assumptions about us. And so I feel as though that didn't necessarily help things. And then I okay, so obviously I was sort of losing after losing after losing. I was just taking L's all the time, and then I just by some sort of divine miracle, like late 2016 or so, I just realized I just kind of have this woke or not woke, but like I kind of like woke up to
Awakening.
what to like yeah ultimately what would actually help me in the end, what worked for me, and I've been using that approach since. And so but I do want to say that yes, I do greatly admire what you're doing. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I like I said before, a few years ago, I wasn't really aware of how difficult it was. I just assumed everybody, kind of just went out with each other, and then I realized how much ignorance and how much, how difficult it was. I mean, it really honestly shouldn't be this difficult for any human being for that matter. But I feel like there are so many misconceptions and just sort of what's the word? Just like negative thoughts, concerning us and, like scale of attraction. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sort of going off tangent. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I can definitely relate to that experience. And so, again, thank you for being on this channel. So yeah. So my first question to you would be, since obviously we're on the topic of dating and whatnot. So, how do you feel as though when it comes to Asian men, especially, and also your thoughts on Black women as well. When it comes to those two groups and like dating in terms of like like stereotypes, right? And let's say you're like a person of color, or you're like a white person who has never gone out with either kind of group or whatever, either kind of person. What are your thoughts on how those stereotypes, negative thoughts, or whatever, can sort of affect one's view of like a type of person or a type of group or whatever? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to circle back to sort of what you were just
Mhm.
talking about before, the entire challenges that Asian men face when it comes to dating, because it's a very complex subject that has many contributing factors. One of them, obviously, is the racism and stereotypes, prejudice that exists in dating. And it's only gotten worse, especially in this kind of post pandemic era, where we have gone from the stereotype of being like effeminate or nerdy or kung fu to now we're walking diseases, right? That's like a
Yeah,
new stereotype. I didn't have that when I was a kid, right? And
yeah,
I grew up in that era where it was like heavily anti-Vietnamese because of the Vietnam War, but also heavily like anti-Japanese because like, oh, the Japanese are stealing our auto worker jobs. And we have unfortunately that time where it's like, oh, maybe we're making progress with Crazy Rich Asians and Fresh Off the Boat and all this kind of representation in the media. And nope, it's gone. Like we
mm,
are now at the point where there is like not simply just the microaggressions, but we're talking about like the full-on Vincent Chin assaults and murder that is happening, right? And it's definitely a concern of dating in this era as Asian. And one of the things that we can't really control that. We can only like control what we do and hopefully like try to date in a safe manner. But um, you know, not disregarding so much as like racism exists, gotta learn how to deal with it. For us Asian guys, the difficulty in dating is has multiple variables in that one, a lot of Asians, especially Asian men, we're taught to objectify ourselves. And what I mean by that is that we're taught to, we got to make good grades, we got to go to college, to a good college, get a good job, well paying job, buy a luxury car, and get a house. And then women will come to us. And what that boils down to is we Asian men, we are only worth what's in our wallet.
mm,
That's it. We have no other worth to people other than, get the education, get the job, and then just, we have money now. And then women will automatically they come to us. And unfortunately, that has ill prepared a lot of Asian men in the modern era of dating, because it wasn't, it was just a couple of generations ago where women had to have a man in order to even have a bank account or even to vote. So they could, they had to have a man. But in the modern age, women can and should be able to have choice. And so an Asian man or any man coming in with just a job, that's the bare minimum. That's it. That's like, you should be like a decent human being. And
mm.
unfortunately, our family, our Asian culture just says like, get that job, get a career, but that's the minimum. And then you throw on racism on top of that, where Asian men are ill prepared, and then you throw on racism, then you create this sort of like this overall dilemma in dating that Asian men face, right? Where we're both ill prepared and we have a structural, racism that, makes the situation even worse. And this is actually, when it comes to, if we were to say like societal totem poles, society does look down upon both Asian men and Black women, right? And what I have found is that Asian men and Black women, there is a sort of, kind of natural attraction that does happen. That's some of my students are incredibly surprised when I say to them, like, see that attractive African American female over there, go over there, say hello, tell her she's beautiful. And they're like, really? What? Especially if they're from Asia and they've maybe never even seen a Black person. But what they find is Black women are very receptive to being approached by Asian men, right? And it's a learning experience for them, right? And there is kind of like a natural pairing that happens, because just society, with the way it's set up, right?
Yeah,
That the, that there is a natural kind of like synergy that happens between us.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, honestly, that is a great response, sir. Appreciate it. And you bring up a lot of really valid points. Honestly, I didn't really think about. It's like, you know, yeah, basically, like you just said, like Asians, especially Asian men, yeah, it is correct. We are taught, to basically, grow up a certain way, you know what I mean, go to college, get a good job, all that stuff. But I was talking with someone else the other day, and it definitely, goes on with what you were saying too. It's like, Asian parents don't necessarily have that kind of discussion that I feel like a lot of parents, other like parents of other backgrounds, in the West, especially in America, have with their children. I feel like it's not, what I mean, even like a lot of other, Americanized Asian parents, Asian American parents, you know, um, I also feel like they don't necessarily have that conversation, maybe because their parents didn't have that conversation with them. It is something that is very unfortunate, and
But dating is an oral tradition,
right,
right?
right, yeah,
It's like passed upon, father to son, brother to little brother, uncle. And then like what would my Vietnamese stepdad have been able to teach me about dating in America? He couldn't. He literally would not have been able to,
right, yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's a tradition that's passed on. And also part of the immigrant experience, for Asian Americans is that sort of survival mentality. Only do the things that are required to survive.
yes,
That's it. It's only when you become more established are you then able to have the luxury and the leisure to like, date for love as opposed to date for, just to survive. And it's unfortunate. But at the same time, I do think sometimes, later Asian generations are unfairly, harshly comparing their parents and grandparents,
right,
because they had to do what they did in order just to survive, where they're coming from like a war-torn country, right? Like
mhm,
maybe they didn't say I love you, but they acted in love to make sure that their children, us, could be successful here in America or wherever. It's just not like love in the Western sense,
right,
right? Just
yeah.
because, just because you see on TV white parents being loving doesn't mean you actually want to have white parents. Like, white parents are still fucked up too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, no, I know that. But um, so that was a great. Yeah, that's a great response, man. So I just had a quick question. It just sort of popped in my head right now, but and I just want to get your opinion on it. So majority of Asian men that I talk to. About the issue, that like we all, or I guess like Asian men, most, some Asian men have with dating, love, and all that stuff. A lot of the common reason that they give for that is that they say that that, oh, it's all because the media, what I mean, it's all because the media portrays this, and the media this, media that, media this. I mean, I personally believe that that is true to some extent, but not all of it. And I was just wondering, for you personally, what are your thoughts on that? What's your take on that? Like, do you think it's really that influential? Do you think people really do care that much about how the media portrays us, or is there, or are there, some other factors or whatever that somehow, make people believe that we're just super unattractive or something?
I mean, America is a race-based society. That's, should be more obvious now than ever before. But, grew up, experiencing racism in Texas, being called gook and chink and all of that and being bullied in that regards. And I definitely went through that period of my life where I was kind of like that angry Asian man, right? And it's like, it's the media's fault. It's the media's fault. It's Hollywood's fault. And yes, those stereotypes exist. All that racism exists. But what I discovered later in life that really helped me become more successful is I understand all that. I read studies. I read studies just empirically that the stereotypes exist, but I no longer let it affect me in like the micro sense when it comes to actually interacting with women. I think, the way I describe it to my students is like women, whether they're Black, white, Latina, that's sort of like a dating iCloud, so to speak. Like 90% of the girls I ever date have never dated an Asian guy, right? So when I go up to them, talk to them, and all that, they have to draw upon their experience in their dating cloud, right? And if they've never even had friends with Asians, and like the majority of American women, have never dated an Asian guy, they're gonna remember what's in Hollywood. They're gonna remember what's in TV shows
Yeah,
and movies and all of that. And they're also going to remember what their girlfriends have said or gossiped about Asians, or what like guys will say about Asians, right? And unfortunately, like if you look like a stereotype, you walk like a stereotype, and you talk like a stereotype, you will be treated as a stereotype.
Right.
What I find is like in person, I can have that command presence, that Asian masculinity and sexuality, where yes, it could be there, but I'm able to impose my reality, my command presence, my charisma, my personality, my confidence in that moment, where she never has to draw upon that to fill in the blanks of who is this person sitting in front of her, because I have a enough force of personality where this is who I am, evaluate me, is the idea of interrupting her heuristics, right? And this is why it's so invaluable for Asian men to learn what I call like direct style game, right? Where the idea is like you are trying to be, kind of like more like James Bond, if you will, instead of like James Stifler. The idea of being confident and powerful and romantic or sexual in that moment, so that, I have like Fabi students, but they can be successful because she doesn't have to think, oh, he's got this weird accent and he's got like weird, Asian kind of odd clothes. But no, it's like, wow, this guy just came up to me like balls to the walls. Let me judge him what's in front of me and not like what's here.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, Hollywood is partially to blame. Absolutely. But obsessing about it is just going to poison your own confidence. Right. There are too many guys that go on Reddit and all those boards and like, yeah, it's media, it's racism. And it undermines your own confidence and it undermines your own ability. Concentrate on making you happy and you taking charge and you taking action instead of like worrying about all this other bullshit that exists.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I agree 110% of that. And I guess, yeah, sorry, I'm kind of going off topic. But I'm thinking of these questions as we're sort of all talking. So another another sort of question that I've had for a lot of the interviews I've done lately is like, what is your, what is everyone's definition of self-love and, quote unquote, working on yourself? In my experience, not lately, because, like I said, I did manage to turn my whole love life around, fortunately. But prior to that, when I was, getting shot down by all these women, all these different girls, one thing I'd hear is like, well, all you need to do is just love yourself and you'll be fine. And, I mean, it sounds like positive advice, but at the time when they're actually shooting you down saying that, you're not really giving a shit. Like, if anything, it's probably not. It sounds a little bit insensitive, maybe like not the right thing to say. But it does get tossed around a lot. People say that self-love. Oh, you see on Facebook posts, Instagram posts, hashtag self-love, self-love, like someone's climbing a mountain, self-love, someone's with their kids, self-love, someone just got a divorce, self-love. And I feel like, for me personally, I feel like, I do love myself, literally. I do. You know what I mean? I'm not perfect for the most part. Yeah, I do care about myself. I care about my life. I try to cultivate, maintain my life and all that stuff. But, um, like, I feel like in the context of dating and relationships and whatnot, and especially when, people are having that, conversation about self-love, self-love to me personally seems like it might be like a deflection of sorts. And I was just wondering, what is your definition of self-love? And yeah.
Well, that particular piece of advice, it kind of harkens back to like be yourself, right? Be
Mm-hmm.
confident. Is both, it's absolutely true advice, and in many
Mm-hmm.
ways is like the best piece of advice, but it's also the most worthless
Yeah.
piece of advice that you can receive, because it's just something one says as shorthand for all the elements that's required to be yourself in a high stakes environment that you would be like nervous in. But it also, there's a cultural barrier in that you have to be able to communicate who you are, to communicate like, oh, yeah, self-love, all that. But what happens if the student is from Asia and has a hard time speaking English and has like
Yeah.
different traditions and different styles of dating and values? How does that happen then? Right. So then there's a perspective, well, that's a white, as a quote unquote, white patriarchal heteronormative way of looking at dating. It doesn't take into account what, someone from another country where the value system, the language, special language, how can you be yourself when you have a hard time speaking English, right? So with the entire idea of like self-love and self-improvement, yes, you absolutely want to be comfortable with who you are, right? You want to find value in who you are, because if you can't find value in yourself, how is anyone else going to find value in you? But what you then have to be able to do is project who you are, because no one has ESP, no one has telepathy, no one can read your mind and like just know your heart and your soul that you're a great guy. You have to, it's like in business, you have to be able to market yourself to your audience, your core audience, right? You don't know how to market yourself, then no one is going to want to purchase you. You're like the product, to continue that business analogy. And what I say to my guys is I teach in a holistic methodology where it's inner game, outer game, and verbal game. The entire inner game is like, it's your thought process, right? Your emotional state. The battle is lost or won before it's even fought, in your mind, because you think, oh, that tall girl would never talk to a short guy like me, so why bother? Oh, that black girl, would never talk to me, or she's so attractive, she's out of my league, so I shouldn't even bother. Like, it's lost or won here. So we've got to work on your mental and your emotional state. Then there is the physical attraction. Like, how do you carry yourself physically? Because attraction happens before you even talk, right? Before you even open your mouth, you are judged by your race, by your height, by your fashion, by your muscles, by just how your aesthetics, right? And your body language. And then finally, your verbal. What do you say? How do you greet her? How do you banter? How do you carry on a conversation? And then also you factor in where you have Asian guys who English is not their first language, they're ESL, right? They can't banter and they don't have the same kind of cultural norms that, someone who has been born and raised in America and has watched every single episode of Friends, right?
Right.
And so it's important to be able to try to master these different elements of how you project yourself. Because if you are feeling inferior, if you're feeling not confident, then you're not going to be able to physically display your confidence, and you're not going to be able to verbally show who you are, that you're a great funny guy. Or if you're like from overseas and English isn't your first language, you've got to work around your language barrier, right? And that's the added, difficulty that Asian men face, in addition to, the stereotypes. We also have to deal with like the own differing cultural norms and or language barriers.
Yeah.
In order to project who we are to the woman, so that, she has a feel, an idea of who this man is in front of her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting you bring it up, because I was thinking of my father, and he came to this country when he was in college. So he's really from where is he from? Hong Kong, yeah, Hong Kong or Macau, either one, I'm not sure, but his birth certificate is kind of ambiguous. But yeah, so Hong Kong, and so he had told me that he learned English through watching television in the 70s, he actually, it's kind of funny because to be honest, I never really had many conversations with my father regarding dating and romance, mostly with my mom. But with my dad, I remember him telling me that he had before he met my mom, he had been in 5 relationships prior to that, and majority of them were with American women. And so the of the few conversations I had or have had with my father regarding that, he's always given me this advice, just be confident, you know what I mean? Don't be overly negative, don't feel sorry for yourself, don't dwell on negative things, and just do your best. And I wish that I have. Yeah, no. First of all, he's still alive. He's not dead. So it's like if it sounds like he passed away, no, it's not. It's just that, like in general, we're all busy, so I don't really see him as much. But I wish, I guess, growing up, especially when I was younger, that I did have, like a lot more conversations about this. Because it just seems like, I don't know. Like my father is also a very short man. He is actually shorter than me, but he exudes so much like confidence and charisma, that it's like, yeah, absolutely. And then yeah, so I guess, yeah, I guess I should have talked to him more about it, but But yeah. Um,
Well,
yeah.
there's like a reason for that, where ironically, if you will, my Fabi, fresh out of the boat, Asian students who come from Asia and they either move here or they come here for school, um, they can be totally short. Fabi Asian hair, Fabi Asian like teeth, Fabi Asian accent, Fabi Asian clothes. But in a lot of regards, they are more successful than my tall, good looking Asian American born here students. And it's because in Asia, where they're born and raised, they didn't face the same types of racism and internalize the racism
Right.
of being inferior, that we suffer here being born and raised. Is because in Asia, they were the apex male.
Hmm.
They were the type of
Yeah.
male that the women there found attractive, and they grew up with that. They didn't grow up with the kind of self-doubt that I did growing up. So they come over here, and yes, there are cultural barriers. Yes, there are language barriers. But most importantly, though, the barriers aren't up here.
Yeah.
Like they don't think, oh, I'm inferior. Oh, I'm short. Oh, I'm Asian. They won't like me. He's just like, I don't understand. Like I say hello, and then they're not interested. But that's easy to teach.
Mhm.
It's easy to teach a guy like that fashion. It's easy to teach a guy like that, how to do your hair. It's easier to teach him like, be more direct. Just go up there and say like, I think you're beautiful. Those are techniques that are very easy to teach. And once he learns that, he can be like incredibly successful. The difficulty, the bigger challenge that takes more of time is the deprogramming of societal conditioning and internalized racism that we Asian men have grown up with when we are born here. Not that every Asian guy obviously has that, but I mean, a lot of Asian men, have experienced that and have internalized that kind of negativity and that hurt for so long that we unconsciously let it hold us back. You can be like tall, and good looking, and all of that, but it doesn't really matter if your mentality isn't right.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And again, internalized racism is something I was not even aware of until college. Because prior to that, I grew up in Pasadena, California, where there's a fuck ton of Asians, and and white people, and some Hispanics and some blacks. But for the most part, I grew up around just like people that look like me. So in turn, so like you said, we like growing up in Pasadena, like we were the cool kids, you know, like people, everyone, and it's kind of funny because like growing up in high school, up until high school, I saw a lot of Asian guys with non-Asian women in my high school and middle school and all that stuff growing up. But then when I left there and when I went to college, because I went to college at ASU, Arizona State, which is like one of the whitest fucking schools in the country. And first of all, yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it was a very different experience for me. It was a culture shock, and not in the sense that like American, because I am American, but it was a culture shock in the sense that like I was around mostly white people for like the first time. I really got introduced to like punk rock music in college. There were a lot of just different facets of. It's gonna sound ignorant. I'm gonna say it anyway. White, I guess white culture, whatever you want to say. I don't know how else to put it, but you know what I mean. And I was like, it was just like I said, it was a huge boom for me. But I also got treated very differently because in college I was first time I was living in the dorms, first time living away from home, first time living with roommates. All of them were white, right? And this is not something that I've shared necessarily on my channel before, but I want to say like for the first year or so, it was honestly the worst year is probably my least favorite year of college because I love college. I did I still go on as like those are like the best years of my life, but first year wasn't. The first year was not very fun. Aside from the racial incidents, which there were a lot, because I literally got called chink, or people laughed, or like all these stupid insults. Especially when I didn't have a car, I had to take the bus, and I basically was sort of being forced to be around other people, on the bus, and also walking everywhere. And one time I actually was walking, it was during the summer, I was walking over to the supermarket because I didn't have a car. And a couple of these white dudes, they pull up in their Jeep, and they pull up like, they don't like try to assault me or anything like that or threaten me, but they pulled up behind me and they made some stupid fucking racist joke. Um, and I got pissed off, man. I mean, I'm a short guy, okay? I'm like around 5'4", 5'5", but like I got pissed. I didn't give a f anymore. I saw the biggest rock nearby. I picked it up, and I was furious, dude. I walked towards these two people, and they literally shit their pants. Like, I'm not like, it's not like they could have, they could have easily overpowered me, maybe, you know what I mean? Easily, kick my ass or whatever, or just held me down. But that didn't happen. They shit their pants. And as I walked closer, my head sort of refocused again, and common sense kicked in. I was like, what the hell am I doing? So I just dropped the rock and just left, just turned back around. But sorry, so that's kind of off tangent. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, in addition to that happening, my roommates in college excluded me a lot from a lot of parties. They didn't invite me out to parties. They didn't invite me, they hung out with mostly, other college kids, other white kids, stuff like that. And they would leave. They go to parties all the time. And I remember a couple times I blatantly asked them, "Can I go with you?" And they, kind of gave me. They were trying not to be awkward about it, but they were basically like, "No," And it was really, it was a really unfortunate experience. And then aside from that, I would approach like white girls at college, or white girls, black girls, Latinas, whatever, non-Asian girls, because I just wanted to try something new, and they all basically like rejected me for the most part. There were like a few. I had like one relationship in college, but for the most part, romantically, my self-esteem was just crushed. It was destroyed, and I associated a lot of that with being Asian. And I was like, you know what? There's not a whole lot of guys that look like me around here. There's not even a whole lot of women that look like me. You know what I mean? There's not a whole lot of Asians, period, in Arizona. And there was this, I remember this one summer, there was this really fine ass, really cute, beautiful Hispanic girl that I really had like biggest crush on. And that was like, it was quote unquote the first date that I'd been on, even though later on it turned out that she had just broken up with a boyfriend. So it was more of a rebound, but it didn't go anywhere. And when it didn't, when my hopes were crushed, and I just felt like shit completely the whole summer. Um, Man, I made it my mission for the rest of my college career to not look Asian, to not be Asian, to escape me from basically my own skin, you know? So I went out, I bought, let's just sort of carry over from that, but I bought a whole new wardrobe. I cut my hair. My hair is jet black now, but back then it was like completely kind of like punked out. I bought a whole new wardrobe. I bought this badass brown jacket that was actually pretty cool. And I started listening to punk rock music. This is gonna sound ridiculous, but I learned how to skateboard. I got tattoos. I did everything, man. I did everything. And literally that was the first time in my life ever that I said, man, being Asian fucking sucks. And prior to that, I would have never said those words. I would have never thought that, you know? And it was just like, since then, I'm like, I've kind of asked myself, like, did I make a mistake? Like, is ignorance kind of bliss? You know what I mean? Like, would you choose to not have to experience any of those issues and not learn about how difficult it is, how shitty it is really for Asian men dating? Or would you choose to stay, I guess, quote unquote, in the Pasadena kind of bubble, where you can live around people that look like you? Your life is in general a lot easier. If I'd gone to school at UCLA instead of ASU, I might have had all those issues. I might not have never, dyed my hair and, gotten tattoos and all this stuff, and now I have that trend sort of carry over to real life, because now I have like 10 tattoos, but it's just like, so yeah, certain things carried over, but just in general. And now I want to say that being an adult and not being in college anymore, I want to say in a lot of ways it's even worse, because like you said, you're dealing with the corporate world now. You know what I mean? The factors like money, factors like, like emotional financial stability come in. You know what I mean? It's just like a lot of girls in college were lenient on the height thing, but like dating in the real world is even bigger pain in the ass because of the height thing, or at least like for the most part. So yeah, sorry, I know I went off kind of long, but when you said internalized racism, that is something that like just rings truer to me more than anything. And it's kind of funny because a lot of my friends in college, or a couple of them were Asian. They were actually from Arizona, but they had an even more difficult time with girls and whatnot in college than I did. And I don't want to say it, I don't want to like do not get it twisted at all, but I feel like I actually, my attempt to look as non-Asian as possible kind of worked. And I don't want to jump ahead into conclusions and say that the girls liked me only because of that, or that they were racist or anything like that. I would never say that. I just think just in general, it's like, yeah, I was like, you know what, like basically fit in, if you want to win or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I would describe that process that you're sort of like at that time, at Asian men on average start dating much later than any other group. We're like, the average age according to sexual studies is 20. Asian American men start dating at 20, lose their virginity at 20. Asian American women lose their virginity and start dating even earlier than us. We're like literally the only group where the women outperform us sexually, right? No other group exists in America like that. And it's this sort of elongated childhood that Asians men have,
Mhm.
where we don't learn the kind of social skills that other groups do. And so I think in your experience, which is very similar to mine, and I'm sure similar to many others, is our personality at that time was very amorphous, very still much childlike, and sort of like a coal that with pressure becomes a diamond. And part of the reason why I suspect that you started becoming slightly more better at dating wasn't, maybe it was partially because you're at that time rejecting your Asian identity, which is a very similar kind of life journey that a lot of people take. While that may be partially true, I think the overall, what happened here was you formed a stronger identity of who you were and your personality. You took on certain characteristics and aesthetics and imagery, and action that is associated with, like, this is the type of person of who I am. So that when she looks at you and talks to you, she understands who you are as a man, as opposed to like an amorphous, child that happens to be, I have students like this. I call them like they're child's in men body, right? They might be 25, 26, 28, 29, but they still have the emotional maturity of like a 12-year-old, and the social maturity, and because they've never grew out of that. And you have to be able to project your masculine identity, whatever that is, whether it's skater or even, one of the new aesthetics that's very popular is that K-pop, right? That K-pop aesthetic, which works particularly well overseas. Not so successful here in so much, but it is still a valid form of masculine identity, right? Because the masculine aesthetic changes with years. It goes from like kind of the emo rocker, and then you had like the goth, the grunge, and you have more like Stallone. It evolves, it goes in circles and all that. But I think really what's happening in your case, to use an example, is you made a conscious adult decision to form your identity, and that once you did that, a woman can tell then who you are, as opposed to just like you happen to have this very soft amorphous blob of a personality. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's for like guys to understand, like, guys, just because you have a college degree, just because you have a job, that's not enough. That's like the basic starting line. Women, at this point, they don't need your job,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't really matter. Like you have to be likable. And are you likable? Like, I don't mean likable to your parents and your mom, right? I
Yeah.
mean likable as a human being outside of just whatever you were taught in your culture. And that part of that is having an identity, whatever that identity is, whether it's skater, whether it's a musician, whether it's like, K-pop, whatever it is, you have to embody a certain male archetype. And I always say to my students, be successful because you're an Asian man and not in spite of being Asian.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I definitely understand that point there, because I think like a few years ago, like up until, I don't know, like I said, 2016ish or so, um, I didn't necessarily exhibit any sort of, I didn't exactly embody any internalized hatred or anything like that of my whole like Asian identity necessarily, but I felt like as I was getting rejected a lot by like women in the real world and stuff, like it felt like a lot of it was because, you know, of my race again. But unlike before, I didn't try to seem, more white or, less Asian or whatever. Because like you said, the game changes, what I mean, as you get older. People are looking for different things and stuff. So I do want to say that ironic, like coincidentally, I mean, I have my own thoughts on it, which is actually my next question to you. But like prior to 2016, in between that little time frame there, I was every it was just the most horrible coincidence or worst luck ever. But I would lose out to basically white dudes. And so me personally, I know that a lot of, I guess, you know, what am I trying to say? A lot of Asian men, especially like white women, and like black women. But for me personally, in that time frame, I was mostly going after, uh, what do you call them? Sorry, my brain is having brain freeze.
Hispanic?
Hispanic woman, yes, Hispanic woman. There you go. Sorry. Yeah, Hispanic woman, and yeah. So, I prior to that, I didn't have a whole lot of experience going after them. There was like that one girl in college, but then it was mostly white, and then I went through that sort of Latina phase, and ironically enough, I just lost out every time I would lose out to like white dudes, and it was just like my worst thoughts about myself came in. It was like it's because I'm Asian and they're white that these girls are going after them, or ending up with them. And I also want to say, I want to get your thoughts, like why. And this is probably kind of like an obvious kind of question, but yeah. So why is it that I guess a lot of women I see on a lot of Facebook profiles and Instagram especially, and this is with like also like famous women or like celebrities or like non just women in general that you see, a lot of them. This is a very specific question. When you see them with their significant others who happen to be white, it seems like they're like that they're so proud to be with someone like that, or they're just like they're like their facial expressions are just so happy and positive, and it just seems like that's their happiest time with someone. Like, I was just wondering, do you sort of understand my question there? Like why basically why is it that most women, a lot of them seem the happiest when they are with white men? And that could be any kind of Asian, that could be like Asian women, Latino women, black women, white women. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll give you like the no bullshit answer. If you could do something and make more money, would you do it? If you could do something and get better police protection, would you do it? If you could do something and you were physically more protected, would you do it? If you could do something and have higher status and, influence, would you do it? Of course you would. And do I blame them? No. That's like a mortgage board of like benefits when you are able to get that, white privilege, so to speak. And so I'm at this point in my life where I can take a very kind of non-emotional, um, surveillance of that. I'm like, yeah, like realistically, if you could just like, change your name from last name from like an Asian name where you would get less job interviews and less money and turn it into a white name, would you do it? Yeah. I mean, like, come on, we'd all do it, right? Let's be real. We would all do something that would benefit us because we're humans. And I can't realistically blame them for that. I mean, for us guys, we don't get like almost any of that benefit. We don't get any kind of political benefit. We don't get any kind of economic benefit. We don't get any kind of like, police protection benefit. If anything, if we're dating someone, with a black, white, and whatnot, and they're with us and they change their name, they suffer because they are with us. They lose status, they lose economic, benefits. And so, yeah, I mean, like realistically, why wouldn't anyone want to go into like a marry up or date up, and they would get their lives would just generally improve, right?
Right.
I mean, and again, I don't blame them. I'm like, you go, girl, go get your bag. Yeah, I don't know if you were good about it, but like, I don't really care about who other people date. Like
Yeah.
honestly, I'm at the point. I know it's difficult for people who are still struggling with their own happiness, but I'm at the point where I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with who I date. Like I don't need to be envious about other people,
Yeah.
right? But again, I do know that it's a hard beast to master jealousy and envy, right? And the feelings of betrayal. But you know what? To me personally, I'm like, yeah, you go, girl. You do your thing.
Yeah.
I just don't care. I personally don't care anymore.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. For me, personally, yeah, like I said, I don't, it's not something that keeps me out at night. I was just curious. That's all. Like I said, I'm sort of growing accustomed to seeing it. So I was just always sort of curious about it. But okay, so just a couple more questions really quickly, and because I know you're a very busy man and all that stuff. But so yeah, these are I guess more sort of general questions. But I guess so yeah. So one stereotype about Asian men is that they are extremely shy, and so I mean, I can sort of relate. I guess I'm not always the most outspoken person. For me personally, I've done a lot of a lot of things, a lot of experience dating online, not necessarily approaching women in person. The times that I have, being honest, it's mostly I have experienced rejection, which is why I kind of prefer. I kind of stay away from that, from sort of that kind of approach. But just in general, yeah, that is a very common stereotype of Asian men being shy. So I guess obviously this, I guess you're sort of reaching into your own expertise here, but why is it that, I guess, yeah, basically, why are most Asian men known to be shy? Why is that like a major assumption? And if that is a factor, if it is true for someone, then what would be your advice for sort of overcoming that and approaching a woman in person or online or anything like that?
Um, I mean, with any stereotype, there's always going to be, some truth to that, kernel to
Mm-hmm.
that truth, right? And it's both external and internal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Externally, if you're dissuaded or you're punished for approaching, and more so than just being rejected, because that's going to happen to every guy on every rejection, every approach. That's just the name of the game. You're punished because like you have like these kind of stereotypes that exist. It is very natural for you, for any human being, to avoid that kind of humiliation, right? That kind of embarrassment. I definitely remember, some of my worst humiliations and rejection, where I actually went home and I cried after being rejected so harsh, was because of racism. Was because the girl literally said, go away. We don't talk to Asian guys, kind of deal, right? But also like just culturally, right? Culturally, where we're not taught, we're not encouraged, to go out and to socialize, whether maybe it's because their parents didn't teach us, because they themselves wouldn't, they're not educated in American dating. So, it's not really their fault, but we don't have that sort of internal cultural kind of impetus that other cultures like African American or Latin American that have an or dating tradition. They have a kind of like, they call it like in Latin American, like that machismo to be like, no, of course you should go out there and approach. And we don't have that, whether it's for cultural, whether it's for because of the immigrant experience or just concentrating on whatever survival. Um, and it's unfortunate, but it just like I said earlier, that Asian American men, we date much later than everybody else.
Yeah.
Like the average age is 20, while the average age of a Caucasian is like 16. The average age for I think a white girl is like 17. Average age for an Asian girl is like 18, 19. So we're much late bloomers compared to everybody else. But this is where you can use your Asian hard work and ethic and intellect, which is what I did as an aerospace engineer. Is like, I'm smart enough and I work hard enough I should be able to fucking figure this out, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
eventually what I did, right? Because this is both an art and a science, that you don't have to feel prey to these larger forces, that you are actually able to take some power, some measure of control over your life. And it's not simply that, oh, only the guys who are good looking or whatever are going to be able to date, right? You either like that entire day, you either have it or you don't. You can take some control over this. You can have some control, some measure, of control of who you want to date, whether she's black, white, Latino, or Asian.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, 100%, 100%. Um, and so yeah, my last question to you would be, so yeah, this is one question that I've actually asked almost every guest I've had on here, but it is sort of a fun question. So like when it comes to dating and especially I mean, it's sort of like tying it full circle back to like AMBW Facebook groups, or just like online dating, especially in general. A lot of people, I guess, in my experience and my observation, they feel more comfortable talking about dating, about posting about dating, even about trolling and stuff like that online, especially. You know what I mean? It's sort of just like, for lack of a better word, just like killing time or wasting time. But for me personally, that kind of kills the whole purpose of being in like, such like a Facebook group, like, Asian men, Black women, or AMBW dating, or AMBW, singles dating, stuff like that. And very few times you actually see people who are on there to actually meet people, to actually date, to actually see, see where it goes and all that stuff. And so, but I feel like that group of people is greatly outnumbered by the first group, which is more comfortable, basically just trolling. So I was just wondering, what is your opinion on why that is? Why is it so much easier to talk about dating, to complain about dating, complain about shitty dating experiences, about men, women, all that stuff, than it is to actually, just get out there and just try? You know what I mean? Like, why are most people like that?
Well, it goes back to the entire like pain and pleasure principle, right? We as humans are more likely to act on avoiding pain than we are to seek pleasure, right? So anything that's like, I need to avoid rejection, even though the upside would be maybe you end up meeting like the future love of your life, right? You're more likely as a human to avoid pain. And so it takes kind of a self-conscious, self-aware decision to be like, no, like I am going to do something that is rewarding and helpful to me. So it's very easy for people to be negative. It's an entire like negativity bias. And also I think in these kind of groups, I'm not a huge proponent of, online game. I mean, I could teach some courses on it, and I've discovered ways that Asian men can like meet and surpass like white guys, right? But in general, I find like meeting in person is the optimal, most successful way for Asian guys to date, right? But I think in these groups, that I've seen that they're waiting for other people to take charge, waiting for other people to lead. I think maybe this is why your group was successful in like kind of you setting up the Zoom dates and stuff like that, where you're like their matchmaker and they're just waiting around for someone to do something. It's like at a party, where it's like, like a children's party, or, in high school or something like that, where the boys are lined up against the wall and the girls are lined up against the wall, and no one is talking to one another until someone has the balls to like do it, right? Maybe that's why, like when you set up Zoom dates, like, why that's popular with your group is both groups are just too shy, too pain avoidant. And maybe that's something that you might want to even incorporate even more, any kind of like online group mixtures or something like that, where you get the Asian guys out of their shell and open to dating. Because it's a twofold thing for Asians too, right? Because they have to be socially trained, in order to socialize, and two, they have to get over their own mental hurdles about race and culture, right? Because the predominant, mate, of Asian men is Asian women. That's what I find with my Asian students is they're like, oh, I only want to date Asian women, which is great. That's fine. Nothing against that by any measure. But like, be open to dating Black girls, be open to dating white girls, be open to dating Latin girls. And so it's that mental hurdle where, they got to learn how to talk, right? They got to learn how to socialize. And then secondly, you got to like work on the minds like, oh, like you want to talk to these Black girls, right? So you got to do that. And then, obviously with your African, American members. So yeah, maybe it's a lot of work, but it's something to consider. Maybe, is they're waiting around for someone else to take the lead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I definitely heard that before. Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, Mr. Tran. This brings us to the end. So I do want to thank you, very
Thank
much
you
for
for
your
having me on.
time. And of course, as I do with everybody, and especially with you being here for the first time. If people want to know more about your services and about who you are, and what you do for them, where can they find you?
Yeah, our website is abcsofattraction.com. It's just abcsofattraction.com. And we also have like tons of free educational material on our YouTube channel, also ABCs of Attraction. And, we teach boot camps, especially now that we're in the post-pandemic era. People are just desperate for social affection. And like, even regardless of the obstacles that we're facing in the rising anti-Asian sentiment, I personally experienced, like, women want to go out, they want to meet people, and it's gotten to the point where like I've actually been approached more by women like now that Los Angeles is open than I have like last year, which is like amazing. I'm like, this is pretty cool. Right?
Yeah.
Women are being slightly more aggressive than they ever used to be.
Oh well, yeah, yeah. That's definitely relief to hear and great news. But yeah, okay, yeah, let's try and thank you very much. So we will say bye now, but everyone, thank you very much for tuning in this video. Like you said, you know, check out everything if you're interested. And yeah, so thank you very much. All right, bye guys.
Thank you.